So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us at today's webinar on the 2024-2025 FAFSA. So my name is Antonia Estrada, and I'm the Program Coordinator at Uproot Academy. And I'm joined tonight by Shantae Lipscomb, another Uproot Academy team member. Hi, Shantae.
Hi.
So I'd like to say a few words about who we are at Uproot Academy before we get started, for those of you who aren't too familiar with us. At Uproot Academy, we want students to feel courageous, confident, and competitive when they submit their college applications. That's why we are ruthless in our pursuit to alleviate the anxiety and confusion around the college selection and application process, including the financial aid process, and that's why we're here today. After this evening's presentation, we'd love it if you could take a few minutes to fill out a quick survey, really brief, I promise. Your opinions and feedback are important to us to help us improve future workshops. And by filling out a survey, you'll have a chance to win a $25 gift card. Finally, if you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A, and I'd be happy to answer them at the end of the presentation if I can. So here's what we've got on the agenda for today. So we're going to look at the latest updates and issues to the new FAFSA. We're going to go over creating an FSA ID, which is essentially the username and password for your studentaid.gov account that you'll need to sign and submit the online FAFSA. Then we're going to look at some selected questions on the FAFSA form, not all of them, just some of them, that a dependent student and their parent or parents would see, and how to complete those questions. And finally, we're going to look at the FAFSA submission summary, which is a document the student receives once the FAFSA has been filed and processed. And the FAFSA submission summary summarizes, as it's called, the summary, summarizes the information you reported on your FAFSA form. No one has received this summary yet. We're going to cover that a little later in the presentation. So the new 2024-25 FAFSA form was soft launched on December 30th of last year. On January 8th, about 2 weeks ago, the Department of Education announced that it had received over 1 million applications from students using the redesigned FAFSA form. They also announced that the form would be available for students and families to access 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So even though the FAFSA is online now pretty consistently for everyone, there are still a number of technical issues that people are encountering. If the FAFSA site is down for maintenance, you can't access the site, or you encounter any technical glitches, try again later. That's the best recommendation we can give you at this point. There's just a lot of people trying to get on the form to fill it in. If the form is down for maintenance, there will be scheduled maintenance occasionally. Check the banner for when it will be back up so that you can go back in and try to log in. In the event of high traffic, again, there are a lot of people trying to fill out the form now. You might be placed in a virtual waiting room. If this happens to you, please wait for the website to admit you and allow you to access the form. Don't leave the website and come back. You might miss your place in line. Some additional updates. Colleges and state agencies will not receive your FAFSA information until the end of January. This means that those of you who have, if you've already filed your FAFSA or will be doing so in the next few days, you'll have to wait until the end of January to receive your FAFSA submission summary. And when you do so, then you'll be able to make updates and corrections to any data on your FAFSA form. We don't have a specific date in January. All we have is the end of January, which is coming up soon. Another update is that direct connections to certain state financial aid applications will not be available for this year's FAFSA. They'll be available for next year's FAFSA, 2025-26, but not for the 24-25. This will affect applicants in 7 states listed here, as you see on the slide: Iowa, Minnesota, Mississippi, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and Vermont. So in previous year's FAFSA, when you submitted the FAFSA, on your confirmation page, you would get a link, and you just click on that link, and that would take you to your state aid application. Now that's not going to happen for these 7 states. Of course, you can still apply for state aid. You're just going to have to log in to go to that website directly to apply for aid. known FAFSA issues. Okay, this may be something that you're all interested in knowing about. So the Office of Federal Student Aid, FSA, has released a list of issues that they are working to resolve with the new FAFSA. As you see here on the screenshot, this is one of those issues. Each issue has a status, a description, and a proposed solution if one is available. Shantae, maybe you can put the link in the chat. We'll be sending this link in a follow-up email tomorrow, but Shantae is just going to put it in the chat if you're interested in looking at it. This issue alerts page has open issues and resolved issues. At this point in time, there are more open issues than resolved issues. And there are also more issues occurring than are being reported on this page. For example, a couple of issues that aren't on this page. A lot of people are running into a problem where either the parent or the student submits the FAFSA application without both of them signing it. This results in an email saying that the application lacks signatures, which can affect financial aid eligibility. In this case, there is a fix coming soon, later this month, when the FAFSA submission summary is sent out. A make a correction feature will be available that will allow you to correct your application and make sure both signatures are there. Of course, correct any other, make any other corrections that you need to if you filed your FAFSA. Another issue has to do with students not being able to invite contributors. So we've heard a possible workaround for this is to put the parent information when you're inviting parents, to put the parent information in all caps. I don't know why that would work, but that's a possible solution I've heard. It's an option you can try if you're having difficulty inviting parents to your form. A second option is for the students to delete their application in the settings menu and start a new application in case the existing application or the old application has that bug and it's been fixed in the new application. So those are a couple issues that have come up that are not on the issue alerts page. Just in case you're wondering is this happening to other people as well, it probably is. So if you have an issue, you can check to see if yours is listed on the issue alerts page. If it's not, then our recommendation is to contact the Student Aid's helpline, let them know that you're having this issue, see if they can help you. That information is on the next slide here. So Shantae, there's also a link to this. Again, we're going to put it in the chat, but it's also going to be in a follow-up email, so you don't need to write it down now. Federal Student Aid Information Center, this is the helpline for both parents and students for help with the FAFSA form and process, and also for FSA ID issues. You see here, help is available by live chat, phone number and email, and the hours of operation. Note that the contact center can discuss FSA ID issues only with the account holder. So if, for example, your parent is having a problem setting up an FSA ID, they have to speak to the representative directly. You can't do it for them. Customer service representatives, are there to provide assistance besides English and Spanish as well, and other languages, I believe. Please note that, as you can imagine, they've been very busy lately. There are instances of students or other people trying to call that are getting hung up after waiting a long time when they call the helpline. So if you can, try to reach out during non-peak hours, maybe first thing in the morning at 8 a.m. during the week, or 11 a.m. During Saturday. And then there are different options available, live chat, phone, or email. So let's go on now to talk about the FSA ID. As I mentioned, the FSA ID is your username and password for your studentaid.gov account that serves as your legal signature when you're signing and submitting the FAFSA. All contributors must create an FSA ID to complete and sign the online FAFSA. All contributors require one, as I said. Every student is a contributor on their own FAFSA. For dependent students, in most cases, at least one parent will be a contributor. And your verified FSA ID is required to complete the FAFSA. So to create an FSA ID, if you haven't already, go to studentaid.gov and click on Create Account. As you can see here, this is a screenshot of what the page would look like. Enter your name exactly as it appears on your Social Security card. That's one of the instructions that's given when you're creating FSA ID. In case you don't happen to click on the little help icon enter your name exactly as it appears on your Social Security card. That's very important. FSA IDs will need to be authenticated with the Social Security Administration. That usually takes 1 to 3 days for that to happen. So we do recommend students and parents create FSA IDs at least 3 days before completing the FAFSA, if possible. Parents without Social Security numbers will also need to create FSA IDs. We're going to talk about that in the next slide. So we'll get to that in a little bit. Again, there have been some problems when it comes to creating FSA IDs. These issues have affected both users with Social Security numbers and those without Social Security numbers. Although I believe the issue affecting users with Social Security numbers has been solved. Some of these problems are detailed on the issue alerts page, which we saw earlier. One other thing I want to mention is many people have reported not receiving an email that their account has been verified. So if your FSA ID still has not been verified after 4 days, if you don't get that email, log into your FSA ID account and go to the settings page. There you can check if there has been a match with your FSA ID and the Social Security Administration, and thus you can check if your FSA ID has been verified. So after 4 days, if you don't get that email, go to your account and check. So let's go on now to a process that's been creating a lot of issues for people, parents without Social Security numbers. So undocumented parents, for example, who have children who are applying for financial aid. So here's how the process works. Contributors without Social Security numbers have the option to answer 1 to 4 knowledge-based verification questions. These are multiple choice. You select the correct answer. If you're successful at answering these questions, the FSA ID is authenticated and you can use that immediately. For those unable to successfully answer these knowledge-based identity questions, a manual documentation process then occurs. So what is that process? If federal student aid is unable to verify that information, then the user must contact the Federal Student Aid Information Center at this number, which we'll be providing in a follow-up email. The individual will also receive an email from FSA informing them to call the Information Center for next steps and to verify their identity. So once the individual contacts the FSA Information Center, FSA will create a case number and send them a verification email, which will include guidance on how to submit copies of acceptable documentation to verify their identity. And you can see some examples of what that acceptable documentation could be. Individuals will also be required to submit an attestation form along with their approved identity documentation. And you see the first page of this form here on the screenshot. It's a 4-page document. This is just the first page. This form is available on the studentaid.gov website, but we'll be sending the direct link to this document in a follow-up email. Shante, if you can put it on the chat as well. But again, we'll be sending all this in a follow-up email. Currently, this form is available only in English, but Federal Student Aid is working to create versions in another language. So after a Federal Student Aid receives the submitted documentation and the signed form, if there's a successful match, the individual will receive an email indicating their identity has been verified and that they may now use their FSA ID to log in and complete the FAFSA. So that's the way it's supposed to work for contributors without Social Security numbers to create an FSA ID. But there have been some issues. As I just went through, the plan was for users to answer identifying questions. And if they couldn't answer these questions correctly, then that's when they would need to provide additional documentation. However, what's been happening is that almost everyone trying to create an account without a Social Security number is being directed to go through identity verification process, which involves calling Federal Student Aid, which can be challenging due to high call volumes. For parents who do get an account, there are issues completing the application. So this problem is detailed on the issue alerts page. As you can see on the screenshot, it's been an issue since January 4th, has not been resolved yet. Unfortunately, as you can see, there's currently no workaround for a parent without a Social Security number. A student may start the application, but the parent will not be able to contribute the parent information. The student and parent will be able to complete the 2024-25 FAFSA form online once the issue is resolved. So FSA knows it's a problem, they're working on it, but there is currently no known timeline for resolving this issue. But they are working on it. If you're having this issue, you're not the only one. If you do have a deadline coming up soon, and you have parents who have not been able to create an FSA ID, talk to that school, talk to that scholarship organization, let them know you've tried, you've been having issues. They know people have been having issues. You might want to document your attempts to complete that application in case you need to prove to that college's financial aid office or that scholarship organization that you did try to complete the form and could not. You might want to take screenshots, including those error messages and the URL and the clock on the corner showing the date and time. You might want to do that. Make sure the screenshot doesn't include any, your social security number for security reasons. You might want to do that. Say, hey, look, I keep getting this error message. If you contact the Federal Student Aid Information Center or the college's financial aid office, keep a record of all the emails. If you make phone calls for help, note down the date, the time, the name of the person you spoke to, do a screenshot on your phone of your call log. Just as in case you need to prove, I've been trying and I can't complete the form. So unfortunately, that's where this issue stands right now. Sorry, I cannot give you better news, but you're not alone. So those are the issues. Now we're going to look at starting the FSA ID from the viewpoint of a dependent student. So you will see 5 sections in the student section: personal circumstances, demographics, financials, colleges, and signature. So we're going to focus on the first three sections based on the scenario. Again, we're assuming that we're a dependent student. So the first section is personal circumstances. This section helps determine your dependency status. So the first question in the personal circumstances section, the student is asked about their current marital status. So again, we're assuming we're a dependent student, so we're going to select the single, never married option. Married students are considered independent students. So if it is your situation that you're married, you would be considered an independent student. But again, we're looking at the scenario of a dependent student, just for simplicity's sake. The next question, the student is asked about their college grade level for the 2024 school year, and if they will have their first bachelor's degree. So these questions are important as they can help determine the grant and loan eligibility. So we want to make sure the student selects the right option here for what their grade level will be. If you have not attended college before, you will be a first-year freshman, so you will select first-year freshman, and then also will not have answer no to the question of whether you have your first bachelor's degree. The next question has to do with personal circumstances. The student is asked if any of the listed personal circumstances apply to them. If the student answers yes to any one of these questions, they're going to be considered an independent student. Again, we're pretending we're a dependent student, so we select none of these apply. You will see if you select none of these apply, all the other options are grayed out. The next question has to do with other circumstances. So the student is asked at any time on or after July 1st, 2025, was the student unaccompanied and either homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless. So if the student answers yes to this question and they don't have a determination from an individual at an eligible agency, they're considered to be an independent student and will not be required to provide information about their parents on the FAFSA form. They'll be considered provisionally independent, but they will be given a provisional student aid index, but they will need to provide supporting documentation to their school's financial aid office. Again, we're pretending we're a dependent student, so we would select no to this question. The next question has to do with unusual circumstances. The student is asked, did you experience any unusual circumstances to prevent you from contacting your parents? So if the student does have an unusual circumstance, and they're listed here, and selects yes, they will not have to provide parental information on the FAFSA. They'll be given a provisional student aid index and provisional independent student status, but they will need to provide supporting documentation to their school's financial aid office. So this is like the situation we saw on the previous slide. with the homelessness question. So again, we're a dependent student, so we're going to select no here. Note that a parent who refuses to contribute to your educational expenses or a parent who will not provide information for your FAFSA form does not qualify as an unusual circumstance. Next page. Here, the student will see their dependency status, and as expected, based on the answers to the questions we provided, the student is a dependent student. So next question I want to highlight because a lot of students have gotten tripped up on answering this question. So let's go through this carefully, please. The student is asked, this is the question that is asked. Are the student's parents unwilling to provide their information, but the student doesn't have an unusual circumstance that prevents them from contacting or obtaining their parents' information? So if you are considered dependent, but your parents are unwilling to complete their section of the FAFSA form, you can opt out of including parent information and apply for a direct unsubsidized loan only. Now, if you would have been eligible for a grant or a subsidized loan or additional aid, you won't be eligible unless federal student aid receives information about your parent or parents. So select yes only if your parents are unwilling to provide their financial information. Otherwise, select no. So some students have not read the question correctly. They've selected yes when they really meant to select no, and then they haven't been able to go back and correct that on the FAFSA. So again, select yes only if your parents are unwilling to provide their financial information. Otherwise, select no. Now, if you are considering selecting yes, think about this first. If you're considered dependent and you submit your FAFSA form without parent information, you will not receive a student aid index. The student aid index, or SAI, is an index number that determines eligibility for need-based financial aid. This number results from the information that the student provides in their FAFSA form. So some state or school-based aid programs, many actually, look at the student aid index in order to determine your eligibility for their funds. Because you won't have an SAI, you won't be considered for those financial aid programs, in addition to not being eligible for federal financial aid, apart from the direct unsubsidized loan only. So you could be giving up a chance at many sources of financial aid. So encourage your parents to provide their information. Remind them that providing their information won't require them to support you in any way. They will be contributing their financial information, but not being obligated to contribute funds to support you and your education. The FAFSA form clearly states that contributors' parents are not financially responsible for the student's education. So please encourage your parents, let your parents know this. It's on the FAFSA form, clearly stated that they're only contributing their financial information so that federal student aid can determine your eligibility for federal student aid, and that if they don't submit their information, then you won't be eligible for federal student aid apart from the direct unsubsidized loan only. So again, please read this question carefully and select yes only sort of as a last resort. In this case, we're a dependent student. Our parents are willing to provide information, so we select no. This section asks several questions about the student's parents to determine who should be invited to provide information on the FAFSA form. When the student is going through the online FAFSA, the FAFSA will guide them through a series of questions to help them determine who to report as their parent on the FAFSA. So these yes/no questions are the same ones that are on this infographic that I've shared in previous webinars, and Shante, if you can include it in the chat. Again, we're going to be including it in a follow-up email. But basically, it's a flow chart you can follow to determine which parent you need to include or you need to invite on your FAFSA form. So I will not go over it now. It's you have the option to look at it later. But all you got to do is follow the questions. Depending on whether you answer yes or no, that will lead you to figure out which parent or parents you need to invite on the FAFSA form. Now, once you've determined which parent you need to invite on the FAFSA form, and this is how you do it. on this page here. So to invite your parent or parents to the FAFSA form, you'll need the following details: their full legal name, date of birth, social security number if they have one, personal email address. If your parent doesn't have a social security number, you also need to provide their mailing address. So it's critical that the student enters their parent's information exactly as it appears in the parent's FSA ID. The one exception is that the email address provided for contributors doesn't need to match the one used for the FSA ID. However, given all the glitches that are occurring, maybe it's best to make sure that all information matches just in case. For parents without a social security number, the mailing address provided should match exactly the mailing address that the parent is using when they create an FSA ID. So that's very important. So that's how you invite your parent to the FAFSA form. And now we're going to be moving on to the next section, which is demographics. Again, I haven't covered all the questions in the personal circumstances, just the ones that maybe require a little bit more explanation. So let's move on to the demographic section. The first three demographic questions are asked for research purposes. They don't affect the student's eligibility for federal student aid. They're not used in any calculations, and they're not shared with the schools to which a student applies. The three questions have to do with gender, ethnicity, and race. You don't have to answer these questions. You can select prefer not to answer if you'd rather not report this information. So this question is very important. The student is asked about their citizenship status. So if you're a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen, you are eligible for federal student aid. Students who select eligible non-citizen should include their A number if they have one. If you're neither a U.S. citizen nor an eligible non-citizen, then you're not eligible for federal student aid, but you might be eligible for aid from institutional, state, or private sources that do not have the same requirements as the federal government, but that do use the FAFSA information. So I do ask that you answer this question carefully. There is an open issue identified on the issue alerts page that if a student who is a citizen initially selects eligible non-citizen mistakenly, then the student is prevented from completing the form, even after they change a citizenship status response to U.S. citizen or national. So make sure you read this question carefully and answer it correctly. So let's move on to the next section, which is financials. This is the last section we're going to be covering in the student section. After consenting on the FAFSA, and every contributor has to consent and approve. So after consenting to having the IRS share your federal tax information with federal student aid, most of the income and tax questions will be answered automatically. They'll be transferred electronically. You will need to manually enter your tax information in certain circumstances only, like if you filed a foreign tax return, for example. But otherwise, most of those questions will already be answered automatically. So in this page, the student is asked questions about their 2022 tax return. So again, for students who have filed taxes and they consent on the FAFSA, much of the federal tax information will be transferred directly. So you're only going to see a limited number of questions. As you can see here, there are only a handful of questions. Answer, only guidance here, answer them as best as you can. If there is zero, you have to enter zero. Don't leave the field blank. The next question has to do with assets. So the student is asked about their assets, such as current total of cash savings and checking accounts, current net worth of investments. For many students, these amounts will be very low or zero. Again, if it's zero, enter zero, don't leave a blank. When filling out the form, enter the exact amount of all your cash, checking, savings, investment accounts as of the day you're submitting the form. It does say current. If for some reason you're selected for verification later, you might need to prove this amount. So, taking a screenshot, when you log into your bank account to check the current balance, that can be a good way to document this. Again, make sure that the screenshot doesn't include any, sensitive financial information. Okay, so now we're going to look at it, the FAFSA, starting the FAFSA from the viewpoint of the parent of a dependent student. So now we're kind of switching a little here. So on the left, you can see the email invitation that a parent would see. A parent want to check their email to find this invitation that the student has sent. The email is going to have the parent's name, and we'll let them know that their student can't be eligible for federal student aid without their input, that the student is going to need the consent, and that they're going to need the parent's information to be able to go ahead and have the FAFSA processed electronically. So the parent is going to go ahead and click login. You can click login directly from the email, and then you'll be sent directly, or the parent will be sent directly to the website where they're going to enter their username and password and access the form. If you don't receive an email, you're expecting one, double check that the mail hasn't been sent to spam or the junk folder. Confirm with your student which email address the invitation was sent to. Or you don't need to wait till you get the email invitation. You can go directly to studentaid.gov and log in with your FSA ID. You can check your My Activity dashboard for the invitation. You can see here, accept the invitation, and then get started filling out your section. If you don't get the email or you don't see the invitation to be a contributor on your dashboard, ask your student to log back into their FAFSA, make sure they input your name, date of birth, social security number if you have one, and mailing address correctly, because that might be the issue why you don't have one. But again, to sum up, you don't need to wait to get the email invitation. You can log on directly to your FSA account. So now we move on to the parent section of the application. Oof, I know a lot of information. We're almost there. The parent information is much shorter than the student section. You can see it has only 3 sections: demographics, financials, and signature. So we're going to focus on the financial section, since this is where the major differences are from previous year's FAFSAs. So this page has to do with federal benefits received. It asks parents if they or anyone in their family has received federal benefits at any time during 2022 or 2023, has a list of those benefits. You can select which ones apply to you in your case. If you select any of these options, then families are not required to report assets. So we do want to highlight the third benefit here, which is free or reduced price school lunch. So there are a lot of districts around the country that have universal free and reduced price school lunch for students in their school district, regardless of income. So FSA released updated guidance in early January for answering this question. This question is important because those who indicate on the FAFSA that they receive free and reduced price lunch, as I said before, they're not required to answer questions about financial assets. For families with incomes under $60,000, this updated guidance has no effect, as they wouldn't have been required to report assets on the FAFSA anyway. But the updated guidance says that families should check the box indicating free and reduced price lunch only if they meet the U.S. Department of Agriculture's income eligibility guidelines for receiving free and reduced price lunch. Previous federal student aid guidance instructed anyone who received the benefit to check the box. So we will, Shante, if you can put the link to the eligibility guidelines in the chat. Again, also available in a follow-up email for you to check. Essentially, the government recognized that their guidance wasn't very clear. There was a loophole, and they've now provided further guidance on this question. Next question has to do with family size. So this page asks the parent if their family size has changed. The FAFSA uses the number of individuals claimed on the tax return as the assumed family size. If the family size is different from the tax return, there is the option to manually report the family size here. Common reason that the family size might be different than the tax return is due to a birth of a child. Remember, this is the 2022 tax return. We're filling it out now in 2024. So that could be a reason, or another reason is a divorce arrangement. So if the family size has changed, you have the option to manually enter it. So students and contributors are not able to view or edit their federal tax information that's been transferred from the IRS because of security and privacy issues, and that includes the family size. You can't actually view the family size on the FAFSA form, but you can check the number of exemptions you claimed on your tax return, which is what the FAFSA is using as your family size. So this is where you would check on your tax return. If the number of exemptions claimed on the tax return doesn't match all the individuals the parents are actually supporting in their household, as I said, you can adjust the family size on the FAFSA. So per the instructions here, let me just go back. So per the instructions here, you can add the number of children or other dependents who live with the parent and will receive more than half of the support from the parent during the award year. So another question has to do with number in college. This page asks the parent how many people in the family will be in college during the award year. Instructions are given here, do not include any parents who are in college. The student is always included in the number in college, so it will be at least one. But you can include others who in the family size who are or will be enrolled at least half time during the award year. Now, number in college no longer affects federal financial aid eligibility, but schools can use this information to determine institutional aid, the funds that they award to students. Tax return information, just like in the student section, if you consent to having your tax return shared with the FAFSA and you file the tax return, you will see very few tax questions that you have to answer. This page asks parents about their assets. Here you will see that child support is included as an asset. Child support received is not included as income. So this information needs to be reported only if assets are required to be reported. Families with an adjusted gross income of less than $60,000 generally will not be required to report assets on the FAFSA. So there could be families who receive child support, but if their income is less than $60,000, they won't be presented with the asset section of the form, so they won't have to answer the child support question. But if you are required to answer asset questions and you did receive child support, you will see the question on the form, and you'll need to report the amount that you received for the last complete calendar year. And that's the information that's given here. So if you complete this form, complete the form this year in 2024, then you're going to be reporting the amount of child support that was received in 2023, because that's the last complete calendar year. And again, enter a response in each entry field, don't leave them blank, and report the value of cash, savings, checking, and other investments, today's value. So that has to do with the FAFSA form. So now this is the last thing we're going to be covering, which is the FAFSA submission summary, which no one has received yet. So when students complete the online FAFSA, they will receive a confirmation page with their estimated student aid index, federal Pell Grant eligibility, and an email about next steps. So students will not receive their FAFSA submission summary for their processed form until the end of January. That's why no one has received this yet. And if you need to make any corrections to your FAFSA form, you will be able to do so when you receive the submission summary. So the FAFSA submission summary is broken into 4 tabs: eligibility overview, FAFSA form answers, school information, and next steps. So at the top, the student will see information about when their form was received, when it was processed, and they also have the option to print the FAFSA submission summary to keep further records. So on the eligibility overview tab, the student sees information about what federal student aid they may be eligible for, such as a federal Pell Grant and federal direct loans. They are also able to view the student aid index, which I'll cover in a second. Any amounts of financial aid that display on this tab are estimates and are not guaranteed. Final determination of the student's financial aid eligibility is provided by the school's financial aid office. So just a note here about the student aid index. This is a number, as I mentioned before, that determines your eligibility for certain types of financial aid. It can be as low as negative 1,500. Colleges use the SAI as a measure of financial need. And note that the SAI is not an exact amount of money that you might have to pay. It's just an index number. The next tab is the FAFSA form answers. Here the student sees the answers that they, and if applicable, their contributors provided on the FAFSA form. Any of the provided answers are incorrect, the student can choose to start a correction here and make a correction button here. Third tab is the school information tab, where the student sees information about the colleges or career schools that they've selected to send their FAFSA information to. The student also can compare important statistics, just as graduation rate, retention rate, transfer rate, default rate, median debt upon completion, and the average annual cost of their selected schools. And then finally, on the last tab, which is the next steps tab, the student sees comments that pertain to their FAFSA form. Some comments may require the student to start a correction or send additional documentation to their school. Other comments may be informational and don't require any further action from the school. So again, no one has received this yet. The first ones will be coming out in late January, but I just want you to be aware to expect this once you've filed your FAFSA and it's processed. Whew, okay, so that's it. So now I'm just going to go over really quickly the links that we're going to be sending to you in a follow-up email so that you know what to expect. So first of all, a link to the Federal Student Aid website has tons of information in all sorts of detail available in both English and a lot of portions in Spanish as well. A link to the Federal Student Aid Information Center that we saw before, which gives you information on hours of operation and also ways to access the helpline. Information on filling out the FAFSA form. We'll be sending a direct link to the page within the studentaid.gov website for resources about completing the 24-25 FAFSA form, including information about creating a studentaid.gov account without a social security number, how to complete the new form, what to do before and after completing the form. Is my parent a contributor when I fill out my FAFSA form? The infographic that we saw earlier in the presentation, the income eligibility guidelines about receiving reduced, free or reduced price school lunch, a federal student aid handbook. Now this handbook is a guide intended for college financial aid administrators and counselors who help students with the financial aid process to help students complete the FAFSA. So if there are any advisors there from community-based organizations, you can refer to this handbook. If it's not really intended for students and families because the online FAFSA provides instructions and help in filling out the FAFSA, but this handbook, chapter 2, which is the part about completing the FAFSA, it does have additional information on some questions that you might want to refer to. But again, it's intended for counselors and administrators, but I'm including it here in case you want to look at it. The link to the issue alerts page, which I mentioned before, which has a list of all the open and resolved issues, but not a comprehensive list, unfortunately. The attestation form that parents without a social security number may need to provide along with their required documentation. A checklist for filling out the FAFSA. As I said before, if you've consented, or you have to consent, if your tax information is electronically transferred, you're only going to see a limited number of income and tax questions. But for some of the questions, like the asset questions, which ask you, how much money do you have in your checking account, you may need to refer to bank account statements or investment records. So this checklist has a list of those kind of documents that you might need. And then finally, we're done, almost done here, a link to the paper FAFSA form in both English and Spanish. Now, the paper FAFSA form is 22 pages long. Some folks might be thinking about going the paper route for the FAFSA, especially if they've been struggling with the online application. So there are a couple of important things I want you to know about the paper FAFSA. First off, if you're considering it as a workaround because a parent doesn't have a social security number and they're having trouble with the whole identity verification process, the paper FAFSA also has its own identity verification process. Unfortunately, we don't have all the details on what that process entails. And secondly, paper FAFSA applications won't start getting processed until February. So even if you pop it in the mail today, it won't start getting worked on until sometime in February. That means the paper option is actually slower than doing it online. So while there is the option to submit a paper FAFSA, the process will be much quicker and easier to complete it online if you can actually do so. Each family will have to make a decision for themselves as to which is the better option. We hope that the issue with all these issues will be figured out soon, but you have to take into account deadlines. and all that. So, that's an individual decision. We do provide the forms here in English and Spanish. If you do need it in another language, you have to call the Information Center to get it in another language, but we're providing the links to the two forms here. So that's it, folks. Thank you very much. Stay engaged with us. We encourage you to stay engaged with us. Read our blogs for tips and tricks. Actually, a blog came out today on the FAFSA covering a lot of this same information. Follow us on social. Come to our free events, such as this one that you're attending right now. We have a couple of great events coming up in the next 2 months. Shante, if you could include the link to the free events page where people can sign up. We have an exciting webinar coming up in a couple of weeks on February 6th on pre-college programs and then how they can give you a head start in your journey to college. We'll be talking about the benefits of pre-college programs in general. And this webinar that we're having in a couple of weeks will feature 2 exceptional pre-college programs that are free or at very low cost with 2 amazing speakers from 2 of the country's top universities. We'll hear from an associate director of admissions who will speak about the University of Chicago's enrichment programs. And we'll also hear from an engineering professor from Princeton University who will talk about Princeton's pre-college programs for students excited about learning about the field of artificial intelligence. And then in March, we're having an event on how to plan and prepare for the SAT and ACT. So please check out our upcoming free events and register if you're interested. We hope to see you there. And then last but not least, our upcoming free major and career fair on Saturday, March 16th will give students an opportunity to connect with professors and professionals to learn about possible majors and careers. And registration is now open for that too. Shante, if you can put the link in the chat. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. I know it was a lot of information. Now I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. I hope I can answer them. So I'm going to stop sharing.